Welcome to Your College Bound Kid,
a podcast for parents, college counselors, students, and anyone who wants a deep dive into the world of college admissions.
Hi, this is Heath Einstein, Vice Provost for Enrollment Management at Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. Prior to my time at TCU, I spent years as a high school counselor, and my career got started in the admission office at my alma mater, the George Washington University.
I'm Mark Stucker, and I'm the founder and producer. Our mission is to make college knowledge available to all. We care deeply about your kid. We believe college is a match to be made and not a prize to be won. We believe in being genuine and transparent. We are committed to covering a variety of topics, including the tough subjects. Thanks to your generosity, we're committed to providing a minimum of 10 hours of fresh, commercial-free content every month, with episodes every Monday and Thursday. We have a variety of co-hosts because we believe and value diverse perspectives. You're our listening family, and we get great joy every time we meet with you, as we do our best to give you tools so your students can soar and reach their limitless potential. Good afternoon, friends. I come to you today with unbridled joy. You know, on Thursday, I asked if we had any volunteers who wanted to send thank you swag out to our donors who allow us to stay commercial free. I had 6 respondents by Friday. 6. I was deeply moved, and I was thinking to myself, snap, I don't know if I can use 6. Like, I'm going to have to turn some people down. And then I had an epiphany. We can ask some of the volunteers to send thank you gifts to the interviewees. Now, we used to do this, but just ran out of manpower, didn't have enough time. So I just can't thank you guys enough. I feel like we have enough for now, but thank you. Now, I have 2 announcements today, and these announcements have me stoked. So you're going to hear the announcements. I'll have a little commentary around them. And then you'll hear the final part, tips on a college resume from Heath Einstein, Chief Enrollment Officer at TCU. And so I really liked a lot of the stuff Heath said, so hopefully you will as well. And then I'm just going to share a few things I've been experiencing in the counseling room when it comes to helping students make their final decisions, which is pretty much what I'm doing now, helping students make their final decisions and helping students appeal their aid awards for seniors. And then you'll hear from Lauren Jimerson from Georgia, Sophie Gertis from NorCal, Northern California, part 2 of 3, helping us to understand San Diego State. All right, let's transition to the first announcement. I think you'll see why I'm teeming with irrepressible joy this morning.
Hi, everyone. My name is John Rooney. I'm the new webmaster at yourcollegeboundkid.com. And I just wanted to go over a couple of the new sections that we've added to the site. We have the Explore tab. In the Explore tab, you're going to be able to search hundreds of episodes, interviews, college spotlights, and blog posts. You can do this by searching for colleges, guests, interview names, topics, other keywords, and it'll search through all of the episodes and bring up the most relevant ones for you. And then we also have the topics section, which is a new section that you're going to be able to browse all the top 100 recurring themes from all of the Your College Bound Kid podcasts. So all the themes are broken down, and then underneath it, they're listed all the episodes that discuss that particular theme. So it's a real great place to go if you're just poking around on a specific topic. Hope you enjoy them. Cheers.
Okay, friends, can you believe what you just heard? A new Explore tab where you can search hundreds of episodes, spotlights, interviews, guests, colleges, keyword topics, searching all the episodes. A new topic section where you can browse the top 100 recurring themes from all 633 podcasts, searching by themes. Sometimes I feel like God is just too good to me. You know, we lost Dilionos after 8 years. He was incredible. He actually designed their website, and he's been amazing to work with. But he's in Greece and 7 hours ahead, which is challenging. And then, you know, whatever the Greece government's doing, cracking down on not allowing American contractors. So then John steps up And John does a demo for me. And he shows me how he can rank the top 100 topics. And he's been bringing me of things that we can do to take the podcast to the next level. I could not be happier. So I do have another favor to ask. If you can go to yourcollegeboundkid.com, check out our new Explore tab, check out our new Topics tab, fool around, play around with the site, and send me your feedback. Affirming feedback, things you like, adjusting feedback, anything that could be better, send it to mark@schoolmatchnumber4letteru.com. And I'll communicate with John, and let's make this website as user-friendly as we possibly can. But I didn't even know something like this is possible because I'm not a techie. So I'm just humbled, but I'm really excited. I'm pumped today. Now that's a perfect transition to talk to you about the webinar we've coming up June 1st on College App-3. You've heard Mary LaChance on here. I did an interview with her and her son, Dan. I also had Dan come back and talk about careers in computer science. This is a techie family, all right? And if you're wondering how I met John Rudy, our new webmaster, well, John's Mary's brother. So Mary introduced me to John. And they use some of the same technology and more sophisticated technology that you see on our website in College App-3. John and Mary are two of the leaders involved in this project. And Mary's demoed it for me twice now. And I love what I see. And she's emphasized this is not for the family that can afford a private college coach. There's things private college coaches can do that we can't do here. But for the large masses of people who either can't afford a college coach or won't, this is a great tool. And, Mary was talking to me. She's like, I really want to help the less fortunate. I wish I could do it for free, but there's going to be expenses involved in all the technology and the support and the behind the scenes and hosting and all of that. And I said, well, why don't you just charge $10 one time? And so Mary said, okay, we'll do that. We'll charge $10. So it's a one-time $10 fee. And, one thing I've learned over the years is if you give something to somebody for free, they don't appreciate it. But if they pay a small fee, and they have a little skin in the game, they appreciate it more. But more importantly, it's just going to help cover all the costs involved because it's a big project. I mean, I'm in the process of introducing Mary to KIPP on the national level. Okay, there's over 250 schools. So, yeah, so this is a big project. So anyway, I want you to check out the webinar. It's on our website, yourcollegeboundkid.com. Go to the events page. You can sign up there June 1st. I was blown away, and I think you're going to be as well. All right, second announcement. This one is from Jed Appleruth, founder of Appleruth Tutoring and Test Prep. And I'm going to tell you a little story about Jed before I play this one. So Jed's come and spoke to our Counselor Connect group before. And, people were blown away by Jed. In fact, if you've heard him on our podcast, he's been on a few times. If you're new, go back and look those up. Look up his episodes. He knows this test as well as anybody that I know. He actually got his PhD in this stuff. And I've known him for over a decade now. But when he came to our Counselor Connect group, shortly after that, we were talking about our speakers for the year. 4 speakers. We have 4 speakers throughout the course of the year. And we were saying, should we do 30 minutes of presentation and 30 minutes of question and answer? And one of the seasoned counselors in our group said, if you're going to have someone like Jed Appleruth, I want 60 minutes of that guy because you can't get enough of him. So I'm going to play this announcement from Jed, and I'm going to strongly encourage you, if you're free, the 30th, a few days away, strongly encourage you to sign up. Take a listen.
So the SAT is digital, and the ACT's recent update, a shorter test, more time per question, and a revised composite score that excludes science, has families rethinking their strategy. Now, what do these changes mean for your student, and how should they prepare? Join Appleruth founder and nationally recognized test prep expert, me, Jed Appleruth, for a live webinar on Thursday, April 30th, that breaks down the updates and shows you how to navigate today's testing landscape. In the webinar, I'm going to cover what's on each test and the key differences. 2, how to choose the right test for your student. 3, smart, effective prep strategies and timelines. And 4, how these updates impact college applications. If you can't attend live, just register and we'll send you the recording later. Go to www.appleruth.com/events to register.
All right. Hopefully April 30th works and you get that on your calendar because you're going to learn a lot of stuff about changes going on in test prep. Speaking of Jed, I actually interviewed Jed on Thursday. We've been talking about doing this interview for over a year now. There's a student that actually does very well with their own test prep. I've seen them. There's a special kind of student that just does amazingly well with self-prep, and we're going to talk about that. And so Jed and I are doing this interview, and we're doing it on Thursday. And so 3:00. So yeah, same day as the presentation, right? I'm mentioning it to you because if you have any question about the SAT or ACT, I can tell you Jed can answer it in his sleep. If you can go to speakpipe.com/YCBK by Wednesday at noon, I should be able to get your question on the podcast for the interview that I'm doing with Jed on Thursday. We're focusing on self-prep, but we're also going to talk about a lot of other things too related to the SAT and ACT. So you got an SAT or ACT question, send it in. And if you can get it in by Wednesday at noon, we should be able to incorporate it into that interview. All right, friends, let's transition now and hear the final part of Heath Einstein telling us everything we need to know about resumes and college admissions.
And now this week's interview with a special guest.
And friends, in our final segment on college resumes, he tells us whether he thinks Texas schools emphasize resumes more than other colleges. Heath makes a statement about a trend he has seen when it comes to class rank and student applications. He tells us how we can read between the lines to know if a college admission office likes you to submit a resume. Heath hammers home one final message that is very important for students in their applications. And he shares a very important message that he used to share with his students when he was a counselor at the Hockaday School in Dallas, Texas. He talks about how far the resume should go back, should include elementary and middle school. He answers the question, does he think admission counselors spend more time looking at the activity section in the Common App or the resume? He tells us some things you do not need to put on your resume. In other words, what are some mistakes students frequently make on resumes? And we close going back to talking about TCU. And particularly, is TCU a good place for Jewish students? A place they can feel comfortable? Heath has some excellent insights on this topic. Listen and enjoy. So I have a sense that just like in Texas, it's the culture in Texas to have a class rank on the transcript, right? And I've interviewed most of the people like you at other schools here, Heath. Raymond over there at UT, Alina at SMU, and others.
My buds.
I can't remember who it was. I think it was Southwestern who told me that 85% of the applications they see come with a class rank on them, just because, you know, not just UT Austin, the other schools in the Texas system are set up to provide auto admits, right, for top 10% or whatever. So do you think that resumes are almost, it's not apples for apples comparison, but it feels like resumes are more common in Texas colleges than they are maybe nationally. And I know that's a wide open question because there's other schools outside of Texas that like resumes just as much as the Texas schools. But do you think there's something to that?
I haven't thought about that. It's a really good question. Maybe. Maybe that's true. I mean, you're probably better positioned to answer that because you work with students who are applying to schools all over the country. I will say that there's something about the culture in Texas where, and I can say this as someone who has lived here now for a number of years, but did not grow up here and spent many of my adult years elsewhere as well, that there's this charm and hospitality to this place and this genuine interest in getting to know people. And it's funny that you mentioned the college that said that so many of their applicants rank. I would say that we've seen the opposite, that we've seen a shrinking number of our applicants come to us with a class rank.
But you're also more than 50% outside of Texas in your applicant pool.
That
which
is true.
Completely different than the public Texas schools.
That is true, but even amongst some of our public Texas schools, they don't rank. What they will do for their students who are applying to the public colleges here where class rank can influence the decision, they will notify the institution if the student falls within the top 10%. Sometimes they don't even notify the student whether they do, but they'll notify the institution.
It doesn't surprise me because this rankings comes with some toxicity.
Correct.
If this kid's trying to take, in fact, I once had a student say to me, I am so mad at her. She went from 4th to 3rd and passed her in her ranking. But the interesting thing is she was talking about her best friend. And so pits students against each other.
Right.
And then it has kids trying to skip a lunch so they can get an extra AP.
It's very unhealthy behavior.
Yes.
Yeah. And look, class rank was never intended to do that. That's what we call an unintended consequence. And so a lot of high schools are trying to undo that by taking away rank. There are always unintended consequences with that too. But what it hopefully allows us to do is to create a greater understanding of who the student is through their curricular choices and their day-to-day output in the form of their grades, and also allows us to do some contextual comparison as opposed to putting everybody on the same system and saying, well, you were in the 97th percentile at your school, therefore you must be stronger than the student who's in the 91st percentile at another school. It doesn't really work that way.
Sure.
So I think it does sort of tie together. I hadn't thought about that link that you described, but there's probably something there.
Well, I noticed trends emerge in cultural, in geographic locations. I do see that nationally. For example, I was not surprised at all Miami went back to requiring standardized testing because Florida was the only state that never even for 1 year, didn't go test optional because everything's tied to Bright Futures, their program, which is merit scholarship that has a testing component. And so that's kind of in the air in Florida. So, it's not the only reason. We know 7 of the 8 Ivies have gone back and there's a lot of other stuff there. It just wasn't. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I see these kinds of things that happen in one area more predominantly than other places. So anyway, just was interesting thought.
Yeah.
So we had another question that came in from an overseas listener. Love to get your thoughts on that.
Hi, Mark and CBYK team. My name is Lillian. I'm a new IC based in Colombia and part of your Counselor Connect team. Thank you so much for all the resources and all I've learned from you and your generosity in imparting information. Regarding resumes, I tell my kids to do a resume that is based on one of the formats of a very, very, very good university that their job placement office uses, just because I believe that resume is going to grow with them year by year. So once they're in college, they can always add to it. They can use it for internships, etc. But I've heard a lot about topic-based resumes by subject, specialization for kids to send to colleges. And I was wondering what admissions reps really think about that. Thank you.
We kind of touched on that with tailoring the resume to fit the needs of the student, particularly if they're looking at special academic programs.
Okay.
There are some colleges that will even tell you, what they're looking for based on what their application requirements are, right? So if you're applying to a college that has an engineering program, they might say to you, for example, we need to see a subject test in physics and math level 2, right? Mm-hmm. Well, if that's the case, you might then say to yourself, how am I going to format a resume that's going to speak to high level math and physics? Like maybe I was in the physics club, or I did robotics, and here's the performance level of our team. We went to national competitions. I mean, that is a very tailored, area specific kind of a resume. That would be appropriate for a school like MIT, for example.
You know, it made me think earlier when I was asking that question, do you think Texas has something, resumes are a little bit more predominant in the state? I know for any of my students, if they don't see information somewhere on the materials from the college about a resume, I would want them to ask, how do you feel about resumes, and what do you think about resume length? Especially, what do you think about resume length?
Yeah.
Now, one thing that I have said as general advice, the Common App gives you the option of saying, would you want a resume upload? That's not a question that you have to have. And some schools choose not to have it, and some schools choose to have it. So I've generally told my students, use that as a clue. Like if they say, would you like a resume upload? Take that as a cue they like resumes, and maybe you'll try to find some information out from them about, is there length if they don't see it? And do you think that's generally good advice, or any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. That's a really clear example of reading between the lines.
Mm-hmm. That's what I say.
That most students wouldn't think about.
Yeah.
And most parents wouldn't think about either. So I think that's outstanding.
Well, Heath, we've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything we haven't said about resumes that you kind of feel like you want to sort of get out of your mind and on to our listeners that we haven't touched on?
I don't think so. We've done a pretty thorough job. Well, I guess I would reiterate the point we were discussing earlier about students really just being themselves, mm-hmm. and not trying to be anybody they aren't. That's really important to us. You hear this term authenticity a lot in college admission, and I always would have students go through this exercise when they were like sophomores or juniors. And I would say, if you don't already have a resume, just let's sit here, take a minute, write out everything that you have done in high school. And I want you to circle the things that you've enjoyed doing. And I want you to draw a line through the things that you do because someone in your life told you it looks good for college. And now I only want you to focus on the things that you've circled and stop doing the things that you have a line through, because the high school experience is too short to be spending time on things that you don't enjoy. And you only have a finite amount of time in your day anyway. And a lot of the time that you spend on schoolwork is assignments that have been given. You might want to do them or might not want to do them. But in your discretionary time, that term that we talked about earlier, you should really focus on the things that matter to you. Because ultimately the things that matter to the student are the things that matter to us. So I guess I said no, there's nothing more, but I gave you an answer. So that's one thing I would say.
Friends, I don't want you to miss what Heath said, so I'm asking Nemanja to replay this message so you don't miss it. Well, Heath, we've talked about a lot of things. Is there anything we haven't said about resumes that you kind of feel like you want to sort of get out of your mind and on to our listeners that we haven't touched on?
I don't think so. We've done a pretty thorough job. Well, I guess I would reiterate the point we were discussing earlier about students really just being themselves, mm-hmm. and not trying to be anybody they aren't. That's really important to us. You hear this term authenticity a lot in college admission, and I always would have students go through this exercise when they were like sophomores or juniors. And I would say, if you don't already have a resume, just let's sit here, take a minute, write out everything that you have done in high school. And I want you to circle the things that you've enjoyed doing. And I want you to draw a line through the things that you do because someone in your life told you it looks good for college. And now I only want you to focus on the things that you've circled and stop doing the things that you have a line through, because the high school experience is too short to be spending time on things that you don't enjoy. And you only have a finite amount of time in your day anyway. And a lot of the time that you spend on schoolwork is assignments that have been given. You might want to do them or might not want to do them. But in your discretionary time, that term that we talked about earlier, you should really focus on the things that matter to you. Because ultimately, the things that matter to the student are the things that matter to us. I guess I said no, there's nothing more, but I gave you an answer. So that's one thing I would say. The other piece of advice I might dispense is typically we're looking for things that the student has done during their high school years. I have noticed from time to time that some students will put things that happened before high school. Now,
glad you brought that up.
There are exceptions to the rule. Let's say you are a musician and you play the oboe. And you have been playing the oboe since the 2nd grade. And you have continued through 12th grade. And you've done marching band and you've played in smaller ensembles and your first chair oboe. Like, you should definitely put, I've been playing the oboe for 10 years. So if you played the oboe since the 2nd grade, include it on your resume. If, on the other hand, you played the oboe in 2nd grade, but you haven't played it since, that's probably not something that we care too much about. So use your discretion, use good judgment, talk to your counselor. Typically, we would say focus on the grades 9 through 12.
Yeah, and that's the same advice I give people with the activity section. Like, yeah, don't put it on there if you weren't doing it in high school, but if you started in 2nd grade, have that in the narrative.
Yeah.
Heath, do you think that your admission officers, when they're reading a file, do you think they spend, and this is just, I'm asking for conjecture here, do you think they spend about the same amount of time on a resume as they do the activity section? Or do you think they would spend more time on one versus another? And I know we're not talking about large amounts of time because you got other things in there you got to look at as well, and you got a lot of apps to read. But, any thoughts on that?
I think that our counselors look at the activity section first because it's on the application.
Right.
And then what they'll do is, if a resume is present, see where there's alignment there. And if there are other areas that the student has chosen to highlight. So I guess I would probably say they spend about equal amounts of time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I just thought of another thought. Some students will put their GPA, their standardized test score, their class rank. Are those things that, and then of course, phone number, email, are those things that you like on a resume?
For a college application, I think all of those things you mentioned are unnecessary because we see that in other parts of the application, and that's just taking up space on a page that could be dedicated to something else. Now, if a student is applying for a job where they think those elements might be important to them, then I think it's okay to include. But there's never going to be a case where we don't have the student's GPA from the school on a transcript or a counselor form, so we have to go to their resume. We're never going to need to look at their address that they put on their resume because we ask that on the application. That's a required field. So my personal advice is to leave those elements off.
Are there any other things that you see students including in resumes that you think, you really don't need that, or any glaring omissions of things they don't? Like if we were to say, if the subject was mistakes or missed opportunities on a resume, anything else come to mind?
Well, one of the mistakes that I see students make on resumes is that they think because it's not a formal essay that they can write in shorthand. And I always say to students that anything you submit to a college is open to evaluation. And so you still want to use the appropriate grammar and punctuation that you have been learning in English class your whole life. So that's one thing that I do see from time to time. You want to double check and make sure there aren't spelling errors, and you just don't want it to look shoddy.
But that wouldn't mean that if you had a little quick bullet point section, it would need to be full sentence.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
No, but if you're writing going back to the example we said before, where let's say you want to only put 2 or 3 things, and then you're going to be writing a full description of what those things are. I wouldn't write in emoji.
Right, and no LOLs or any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Hey, Heath, let's close with a Texas question. So I work with a sizable number of people in the Jewish community, and a lot of times I will recommend TCU, and sometimes they come back and say, I just don't think there's many Jewish kids. And of course, you've got Texas Christian right in your name, which immediately, we've talked about this before, right? It creates a stigma. And I'm pushing back on that a lot. Of course, it gives me a great opportunity to talk about you. I don't think you would be over the whole office, and listeners may not know this. He's had multiple promotions since he got to TCU, so they're clearly happy with his work. You and I have talked offline about some of the things going on and, for Jewish students, but could you speak to a Jewish student that's wondering if TCU is a place that they could be for them? Because I'm answering that question a lot, but who better to hear from than you?
I appreciate the question. You would have no way of knowing this, but I just came from a meeting where we heard from our chaplains in the Office of Religious and Spiritual Life, and they were trying to explain the C in TCU to a large audience. And it's worthy of exploration because we are affiliated with and we're founded by 2 ministers in the Christian church, Disciples of Christ. And it is specifically because of the C in TCU, not in spite of it, that we are an inclusive and welcoming community, because that particular denomination is, by its very nature, ecumenical, meaning there is room under this tent for everyone. It is not a place that is going to say, you must believe X, Y, or Z. And that is why I, as not just a Jewish person, but the son of a rabbi, so I'm very committed to my community, I feel extremely comfortable here, so much so that, as I mentioned earlier, my daughter is here. And I will tell you that given the current state of the world, not just around the globe, but even here in the United States, there is no better place for a Jewish student to be than a place like TCU. And we have seen this over the last couple of years, this sort of migration south. A lot of Jewish families from the Northeast and the Midwest are looking for institutions that perhaps they wouldn't have looked at a generation ago, or maybe even 5 years ago. And I've had more conversations with Jewish families in the last 2 years than I had in the previous 10 years combined. So we are a wonderful place. And we have a Hillel, Jewish Student Organization, a phenomenal advisor to that organization. And we've got students who just love being here and feel very comfortable in their Jewish identity. And I'm always happy to talk to any families you have in more detail about that.
Yeah. And in fact, in fairness, some of the reason it comes up is people saying to me, I'd always thought of that as just Christian only, but I'm hearing more and more Jewish students are looking there.
Yeah.
So tell me about it. Like, that's been the context of a lot of the questions that I'm getting. And by the way, I know Heath means what he said because he's told me this offline. If you have any Jewish family that wants to know what the climate is like at TCU, please have them reach out to me. Heath, why don't we close by you giving your email and how they could reach you if we have anybody in that category?
Absolutely. My email address is h.einstein, EINSTEIN, @tcu.edu. I usually respond within 24 hours when I can. And my phone number is 817-257-6498. That's a direct line, and I answer when I can.
Friends, you don't get many chief enrollment officers at schools, approaching 15,000 in size that give you the direct phone number like that. So take that as an insight into the culture. Thanks, Heath. Always appreciate having you on. I'm looking forward to your appearance in the next 6 months, and I'll be thinking about what topic we'll have you address. But our listeners love having you on. I love talking to you, and I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity. Always love it.
Take care.
All right.
Friends, this concludes this interview with Heath. But if you have any topics you want me to address with Heath when I interview him again in October, please speak up and let me know. friends, as I mentioned to you, I want to share some insights from the counseling room. So I've never seen it like this. I have 5 students right now that are completely torn. It's ripping them apart which school to attend. So I'm looking back and I'm asking myself, I do this every year, like, okay, what could I have done differently to not have these students in this position? I mean, it's great to have choices, so it's kind of a first world problem. But here's what I'm saying to myself, and these are all things I know, but I didn't emphasize them enough. All right, if you have either too many colleges on your college list, or if you don't visit any colleges on the front end, this is a problem that I'm seeing. Let's say you say, oh, well, it's too expensive to visit on the front end. Who wants to visit schools if you're not going to get in anyway? Let's wait until we see where we get in, then we're going to visit. And then you get in 8 schools. It's almost logistically impossible to visit 8 schools in March and April, given the other things going on. So just be mindful of that, whether you shorten your list or you do some more visiting on the front end. But I don't recommend going to a college sight unseen, so you should never apply to more colleges than you'd be able to visit. That's one thing. Secondly, some of the students I'm working with, and the families, quite honestly, they're just completely torn between how much focus should they put on the scholarship or the amount that they're paying and how much money should they put on prestige. And it's just ripping them apart. Well, that's a personal thing. Everybody's going to come to their own conclusion on that. But what I want to encourage you to do is to really think about this a lot ahead of time, because it's very, very hard when you're trying to figure all this stuff out and you have to make a decision in the next 30 days. And parents, this is very important. Come up with a maximum amount that you're willing to contribute and be extremely clear to your kids about what that maximum is. Now, one of the things that I'm seeing that's happening is parents so badly want their kids to be happy because they love them with every fiber of their being. So they're saying, it's up to you, Sue, to make this decision. But the kid can sense if the parent is hoping that they pick either the more prestigious option or the one that's going to save them more money. And so the parent's putting it on the kid, and the kid can read the room and can tell what the parent really wants, and they're contorting themselves like a pretzel. So parents, you should be comfortable saying the most that I can pay for college is X. I don't encourage you to just do that willy-nilly. I think you need to go look at your entire budget. You should look at all the money you're going to save by not having a kid at home and go through a methodical process. We've done a whole episode on that way back in year 1 on how to do that. It's a chapter in my book on that. So I think there's some intentionality should go into that, and then give the student the freedom to pick within the financial parameters. So, but trust me, they know how you think. Your kids know how you think. So just put some thought into that, because it's tearing kids apart. Now, and I get it. You want to see your kid happy. You also don't want to hear, I chose that school because you wanted me to go there. But there's a time when you just have to speak up. But the best thing to do is to go through a methodical process on the front end, figure out what your parameters are, and then you can stay within the confines of those parameters. And you shouldn't feel bad about saying, this is the most that I can pay because I don't want to be working until I'm 72. Or I'm not doing a home equity loan, or I'm not doing a Parent Plus loan. I don't think that's responsible. Like, don't feel you're being a bad parent. I used to say, this presentation at KIPP, I used to have literally all the parents stand and say, repeat after me, repeat after me. And I went through this whole thing. They had to repeat after me. And I would say, I am not. They'd have to say, I am not. Then I would say, a bad parent, a bad parent. And it went on to say, because I won't let my kid go to a college that's unaffordable for us or for them. So don't feel you're being a bad parent. It's oftentimes you're being a responsible parent. Now, I shared a couple analogies this week for families who are wrestling with this. One is a family from Northern California, and they said it worked for them. So I'll see if it works for you. So I like Thai food. And I have 2 Thai food restaurants I really like a lot. One is in Atlanta and one is in Peachtree City. And my favorite thing at Thai food are the curries. So sometimes when I go to my Thai food restaurant, I'm torn because do I get that yellow curry? Because I really like that yellow curry with the potatoes. Or do I go for Penang, which I also like. Occasionally I'm wrestling back and forth. But here's the thing. I like both of them. I don't like okra, especially squishy okra. You know, I lived in Texas. You got a lot of squishy okra. It's not like, do I get yellow curry or do I get that disgusting squishy okra? I'm going to be okay because I'm choosing between 2 things that I like. So you know what? I can't go wrong. And sometimes that's what it's like for your kid, and your kid needs to hear that because there's a tendency for the kid to think, oh my goodness, if I pick the right school, I have this Cinderella experience, best 4 years of my life, my career takes off, like I won the lottery. But if I pick the wrong school, I'm doomed to a life of misery. It's not like that. When you're really torn, you can't go wrong. So sometimes when I'm at the restaurant, I just say to myself, just pick the curry because you like them both. And either one's going to be a good experience. And sometimes kids need to hear that because it can be liberating. If they fall into that thinking of, if I pick the one, I get the great experience. And if I pick the other one, I'm doomed to 4 years of frustration and misery. No. One's yellow curry and one's Penang, and you like them both. So whatever you pick, just know that either one's going to work. And just know something else. You control your college experience. It's up to you to learn how to navigate the way through the school. We're going to have a lot of interviews coming up. You know, Liz just set Lisa up with one this week. I set a couple up myself this week about helping you navigate your way through college to maximize and get the best out of the college experience. You got to pick the right roommate. You got to get the right advisor. You got to take advantage of the Academic Success Center or mental health services. You know, picking the right major and the right study abroad experiences and get to know the Career Center and join the right clubs. Like, they're all there for you. You navigate your way through the college process and you'll make it a decision between yellow curry or Penang curry, of which for me, I can't go wrong. You won't be picking squishy okra or yellow curry. Okay. Now, I guess you guys can tell food. I like food, right? Because I got another food analogy. This time I shared this with a New Jersey family. So sometimes, you know, when I go to these conferences, they're walking around with the tuxes on and the platters of food. And they have the hors d'oeuvres, right? They have all these high-end hors d'oeuvres. They're walking around and you just kind of have your little stick and you have a choice. You can pick the bacon wrap scallops, or you can pick the chilled shrimp, you know, or you can pick the beef Wellington. And you're just walking around, you're chit-chatting while you grab your little hors d'oeuvres. And the thing is, you're the one that's taking the food, right? They're giving it to you. But the way some people approach their college search is like when the waiter or waitress walks around with the hors d'oeuvres, you know, you're saying, Aunt Jenny, try the bacon wrapped scallops. Tell me what you think. Aunt Jenny tries them and says, they're really good. Then you're saying, Rachel, you're my best friend. Try the chilled shrimp. Can you try the chilled shrimp? And Rachel says, hey, the chilled shrimp's really good. You say to your mom, try the beef Wellington. What do you think? And then your mom says, the beef Wellington tastes really good. And now you're contorting yourself into a pretzel because you get one. You got one hors d'oeuvre. You only get one. Now you don't know. Do I take the beef Wellington? Do I take the chilled shrimp? Or do I go for the bacon wrapped scallops? You only get one. When the answer is you pick up the little stick and grab it and you try the beef Wellington. You try the chilled shrimp. You try the bacon wrapped scallops. You trust your own taste buds. One thing I'm seeing that's contorting people into a pretzel is too many cooks in the kitchen, too many voices in their ear telling them where they should go. Trust your instincts. Trust your taste buds. And you're more likely going to make the best decision for you. Because you know what? Rachel, Aunt Jenny, or even mom doesn't know your taste buds like you know your own taste buds. Okay, you guys can see I like food. All right, friends, let's transition and hear part 2 of 3 with 2 of my students, Lauren and Sophie, breaking down San Diego State University for us.
And now it's time for our college spotlight of the week.
Friends, in part 2 of my interview with Lauren Jimerson and Sophie Gertis, students at SDSU, Lauren and Sophie share what are the things they didn't know until they arrived at SDSU. Sophie and Lauren share what they feel are the stereotypes of San Diego State, and they comment whether they feel these stereotypes are true. Lauren and Sophie talk about the kind of student who is really good fit for SDSU. I share some stats for San Diego State, both in terms of their size and their growth, their application numbers. Lauren and Sophie talk about the kind of student that shouldn't go to SDSU in their opinion. Sophie and Lauren talk about the political climate at SDSU, and they answer the question, would a conservative student be comfortable at San Diego State? Listen and enjoy. So this next question I'm going to ask you, some of you may have answered, but it's a broader question. So what are the things that you didn't know about San Diego State until you got there? And it can be positive. You know, it could be positive or negative or neutral, but things that you didn't know you were getting until you got there. What would you say?
I think a common misconception that people have is you kind of don't realize SDSU doesn't really have much of a college town, and it's not super central to any main areas of San Diego. And I think a lot of people got here freshman year, and in their mind they're by the beach, and in their mind they have like bars and restaurants to go out to, and you get here and it's basically just the campus and then like a neighborhood. And to get to the beach you got a 15-20 minute drive. To get to downtown it's like a 20-minute trolley. Like you're not super central to anything until you have a car, and I think that's something that was like a big shock to a lot of people once they got here.
Lauren's nodding vigorously. Anything you want to add, Lauren?
I definitely agree. I think if you're looking for that more downtown central view, USD is going to be your school, UCSD is going to be your school. SDSU, and it can be a positive and a negative. For me, it was a positive because, again, coming from out of state, my parents were very wary about sending me to a school where it's like very urban and very downtown. Like, it's just a parental concern. So when they got to SDSU and they saw that it was a very residential area, I think that it alleviated some of their concerns because it is very residential. A lot of the student housing, like I lived in student housing right behind it. It was a neighborhood. Like there were little kids and it was families. And I like that personally. I like the idea of being close to a city but being able to leave without feeling like I'm super, super suburban. But yeah, that's definitely something I would agree with.
This might surprise you, but they also don't feel like you're right in the heart of San Diego. Of course, UCSD's La Jolla, so La Jolla's a little different, right?
Yeah.
And then UCS, I mean, because it kind of depends on what your vision is of being in the city.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah. Does that surprise you, Sophie, or not?
No, that makes a lot of sense actually. Because for me, like I've always been a little jealous of UCSD because they are right next to the beach, and that was always kind of what I was hoping for when I went to a school by the beach. But it definitely is a little bit of a drive from everything else, so that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, that's closer to the beaches, but not necessarily downtown San Diego. Yeah, definitely. So here's one for you. What are the stereotypes of San Diego State, and do you think they're true or not true?
So I would say one of the biggest stereotypes is that it's the party school of the San Diego area. And I would say it's true and untrue. It's true in the sense that if you're at the parties, you'll find a lot of UCSD and USD students. Like a lot of those students will come to San Diego State to have a good time. And not even just for the parties, like the actual just social events, they'll come because I think we might have the biggest campus or just something. We have a lot of facilities. So that part is true, but it's also untrue in the sense that it's a really big school. And so if you're in Greek life, it can feel like Greek life is everything. But I was never in Greek life, and I never felt like I was missing out on something, or like I didn't have as good of a time. I never that was actually just never a thought that went through my head. So I found that I found it quite easy to be a very studious and very academically focused student, um, which might surprise people, but I actually don't find it that surprising because it's a very beachy town already. So you're kind of already getting the lax vibe just by existing in San Diego.
Anything you want to add to that, Sophie?
Yeah, that was definitely the reputation I had always heard, was that it was just like a big party school, which in high school, I was really against SDCU, not just because of a big party school, because I kind of wanted that. I wanted a big fun school. But I just think that everyone I had seen at my high school who went there maybe embodied this stereotype a little bit to the extreme. And I was a little bit nervous about that. But then I got here and it really is like you make your own friends, you choose your own adventure. And it's such a huge school that, I mean, you can be in that small minority of people who are really, really partying, or you can be like in a much larger group of like kind of in between people, or you can be in another group that doesn't really like to party and you'll always find your people and find something to do, which I think was like a big relief.
Friends, Sophie just said something that's very profound. If you heard my interview with Alina Hicks, the chief enrollment officer at SMU, she said something very similar when I asked her if a more progressive student would find their people at the more conservative Southern Methodist University. I don't want you to miss what Sophie said. So I've asked Amanya, our sound engineer, if he will go back and replay what Sophie just said. Pay attention and don't miss it.
It really is like you make your own friends, you choose your own adventure, and it's such a huge school that, I mean, you can be in that small minority of people who are really, really partying, or you can be like in a much larger group of like kind of in between people, or you can be in another group that doesn't really like to party and you'll always find your people and find something to do, which I think was like a big relief.
You know, it's funny. When I was at UCSD, they say, San Diego State, party school, party school, everybody I talked to. Then when I was at SDSU, they would say University of California, SD, University of California, the socially dead.
That is what people do say. People definitely say that. I think it's because those schools are a little bit more spread out, and I don't know.
And they're really the only two big schools in San Diego because
Exactly.
USD's mid-size. And then, what's the Christian school that's right on the water?
Point Loma.
Point Loma, Point
Yeah.
Loma's so small,
Point
so
Loma's so
small, like
small.
1,000 people. So, and that's really it for San
Hmm.
Diego, you know. So those are really the schools. Yeah. Any other stereotypes besides party school?
I would also say very fitness and health oriented. And I think this is more maybe just a SoCal thing in general, but very much SCCU. And I would definitely say that's very true. It's a very health oriented school. It has just a very strong wellness culture. A lot of the food is fresh and made to order. And there's a lot of different like fitness classes they offer, a lot of different like there's surfing. And so yeah, I would say that very much
So,
so.
so I'm curious what Sophie thinks about that because that's kind of a California thing, you know.
Maybe it is.
Like I feel like you get that in California and even in the Pacific Northwest too, and in Denver definitely. So, do you feel that's like a San Diego thing, or do you feel that's kind of just how California is? What are your thoughts on that, Sophie?
I think that it's definitely more so down here. I don't know if it's just more so down in SoCal
Mm-hmm.
or more so just in general in San Diego or SDSU maybe because it's a college and I think young people generally tend to be more into that. But like our gym, we have a nice gym, but it will be packed. Like especially coming back from New Year's and stuff, like people are in there and everyone's wearing their little workout sets and they're going to their yoga classes and like there's definitely a culture of that for sure. But I think it's really fun like I was able to take the surfing class my sophomore year, which was so so fun. And like you can take wakeboarding and like stand up paddleboard yoga and stuff like that. And like there's people taking those classes and you can make friends in it. And I think it's a really cool thing to have on a college campus.
It's great. Let's talk about the kind of student that you feel would do really well. It would be a really good fit. Like flip roles. You're the college counselor now. Okay. And somebody walks into your office, you've already like looked at their academics and everything, and you talk to them. What are some things that if you were to hear them say, you might think, ah, SDSU could be for you?
I think some like buzzwords that would go off for me is like someone who's very social or extroverted, someone who likes a big school, who maybe is in that in high school or wants to be in that, someone who like they like to get their stuff done, but they like to have fun too, and someone who really values like weather and location above all else. I think is something that you have to a little bit if you want to come to school here.
Anything you want to add to that, Lauren?
I would say I would say entrepreneurs, people who are very interested in forging their own path in whatever it is that they're interested in. And I would also say people who are very public interest oriented. Like San Diego State, I would say it's very much a teaching school. And so it's very big on kind of public interest in bettering the city of San Diego. So I would say people who are very entrepreneurship focused, people who have an idea and they need support. The school is very big on supporting students. Like, I know that in the Black Resource Center, there were a lot of Black entrepreneurs, and they would often hire them. Like, we had a student who ran this like 360 photo booth thing, and she would get hired out for all of our events. So I would say if you have a product, like you have something that you want to sell, do that at San Diego State, and they will give you money. Like they will give you money, they will support you, they will advertise your services, and you will get constant business because it's such a big school. And so they're constantly servicing many different things. Like there's a lot of different events that need a 360 photo booth, and you're right on campus. It's easy. You're also a student at San Diego State, so it's kind of like this mutual security. So I would say, yeah.
We've mentioned a few times that San Diego State's a big school, and Lauren also has commented on it maybe growing, maybe sometimes a little bit quicker than her liking. So I thought I'd throw some numbers out for students. So it has 35,800 undergraduate students. So that's a big school. And there's another 5,400 graduate students. So it's almost 40, close to 42,000 graduate and undergraduate students. And it's actually over 43,000 because they do have a global campus with some online courses. It's like another, like over almost 2,000 students participate in that, may even be over 2,000 now. And as far as its growth goes, that's an increase of 4.6% from last year. So that's almost 5% higher in 1 year. And as far as the applicants, massive amount of applicants. They had 120,000 applicants, including 95,000 first-year applicants. And so San Diego State is in the Cal State system. There are 23 Cal States. And by far and away, San Diego State and Cal Poly SLO, San Luis Obispo, those are the two most prestigious and most in-demand CSUs. And they get the most applications by far, and the most out-of-state and in-state. So they're a little bit about the kind of the numbers if you're not familiar with SDSU. So let's talk about the opposite question now. Who is somebody that you are like, don't go to San Diego State. I just can't see you there.
The first thing that comes to mind are people that really value modesty. I think if you come from an environment where you are very conservative and you prefer more conservative clothing, do not come to SCSU because it seems very like you wouldn't think it, but you will see a lot of bikinis, you will see a lot of short shorts. And personally, it doesn't bother me. I like the beach town feel, but I remember like there were a lot of times where we'd be in Ubers and they'd be like, "What is going on?" And I'd just be like, "It's San Diego State, I don't." So I would say if you're very conservative, you value those things, definitely pick a different campus.
Did you ever hear anybody complain about that? Like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself in?
Yes.
Tell me about that, Lauren. What did that look like?
I heard people complain about it because I think some people, you know, some people, they come from a background where school, you're supposed to dress up, and it's somewhere where you present yourself as the career that you want to go into. And so I think it can be off-putting because I think some people think, oh, you're taking school very casually and this doesn't mean anything to you and you're clearly here for a different reason. And I can understand that mindset, especially coming from the South where that is a predominant mindset and that's just the culture. But I would say that on the flip side, I've never seen that to be true. And San Diego, I mean, the weather is just so nice. And honestly, it's a lot to dress up constantly. You're going to be sweating. And while you're there, you might as well enjoy the summer. And I think what ends up happening is a lot of the time people will go to class and then go to the beach. And so they're kind of dressing for that in between. And it's just not the culture out there that like you need to dress up and that shows respect. I think it's really more the way that you conduct yourself in the classroom because a lot of the time it would be the girls that are very beachy. They, you know, they look like sororities asking the most hard-hitting questions, very much involving themselves in the school. They very much, I would say they destroy that stereotype of like the, you know, the kind of party sorority blonde girl, for lack of a better term. I would say that that stereotype is destroyed, you know. But yeah,
Some of this is Southern California because
very
some
yes,
of the
yes.
same things you're saying, everybody says, or not everybody, but a lot of people say the same things about UCSB, which is right by the beach, right? University of California, Santa Barbara. And a
Hmm.
lot of the same things are said there. And some of that is just the SoCal vibe, like hop on your skateboard and take off and chill. Now, UCSB, University of California, Santa Barbara, is even closer to the beach. So some of the stereotype comes from just being close to the beach. And being close to the beach attracts students who love the beach. And some of it is just a Southern California vibe. If you talk to students and parents in NorCal, Northern California, it's one of the main SoCal stereotypes that they have. And some love it. And they think that this enjoyment of life, this balance of work and fun and enjoying life is very healthy. And then other more hard chargers think it's too lax.
Exactly. Exactly.
Sophie, what would you say?
I would agree with that, and I would also say if you're the type of person who's like very academically competitive or who's very rigorous with it and has that kind of mindset, this school probably isn't a great fit. I don't There's not a super competitive vibe here, even in like more intense majors. I don't think it's like we're fighting each other out for the internship or anything. It's kind of like good luck and do as you will. And I think that was a big thing in my high school is everyone was very competitive and that kind of put me off. So here I was really happy to see it's not the case. But I know a lot of people thrive in that environment. So if that's something you're looking for, this probably isn't going to be a good fit.
I would think that's an adjustment for everybody who's coming from Palo Alto, Menlo Park, any of those kind of surrounding communities because they're so go 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 go. Like,
Yeah,
do you
for
hear that
sure.
from your other people from your area? Like, this is such a different vibe.
Yeah, I definitely have some friends that are from there's a lot of people from the Bay here, and everyone who came here is like, I think they came here knowing that it would be different and
Mm-hmm.
hoping for that, and it's like a big relief to everyone.
No, this is good. This is good. Did we cover anything? Is there anybody else that you would say?
I think
Yep, go ahead.
the modesty is definitely a good point,
Mm-hmm.
in clothing and also just like in vibe. If you're someone who's like a little bit more buttoned up, it probably is going to be a little bit of a shock. It's definitely a shock, like when people's parents come for parents' weekend, they're definitely a little bit surprised because again, like it does have a reputation for a party school, and you will see that. So like if you're someone who doesn't like to see girls in bikinis going to a party or girls in their little skirts or people like on their way like in giant groups going to the frat or whatever it happens to be, that's probably going to surprise you. If you don't like that, maybe steer clear. But also you don't have to participate in it obviously to have fun. You should just know that it's definitely there every weekend.
I know this doesn't represent either of you, but what about students that are like very politically conservative? Do you think they would find their people, or do you think they would feel like I'm not really finding my people here?
I think that there's definitely a conservative group or population at SDSU, I don't know that they're like loudly conservative or super politically active. So if you're like a very politically active conservative person, I'm sure there's groups for you or clubs. But I think if you're like generally conservative, I know a lot of people who seem to have conservative views, but just like aren't necessarily voters or wouldn't like take a stand. But when you listen to them talk, you're like, oh, we have different views a little bit for sure. So I definitely think you could have people with the same views as you. But honestly, if you're politically active in any way, I think there's not like it's not as political of a school as somewhere like Berkeley or Santa Cruz, or it's definitely like a little bit more quiet. Like you'll see protests and stuff, but it's not all encompassing the way it is at other campuses.
Lauren, you're the political science major. What are your thoughts on that?
I completely agree. I think it's just not a super big political school. And what I mean by that is not that there aren't political events, because there definitely are, and we'll get into that, I'm sure. There are a lot of civic-minded people. So I would say a lot of the politics it comes from more of a civic and a more union stance rather than more of an ideological stance. SDSU, I would say it's more of you could say a liberal environment. I don't know if I would say liberal politically, but the culture is liberal. Like it's a very open-minded environment. People are exposed to a lot of different types of people on the regular. So I wouldn't really say that it's a place where someone who's conservative would feel out of place. I think it's hard because conservative in California means something different than in Georgia. I feel like if you're a conservative from the South, you would not fit in. You would absolutely not fit in. It would feel very shocking culturally, politically. It's just a completely different landscape, completely different politics. But I would say if you're more conservative from coming from California, there's definitely groups. I would say San Diego is a little bit more conservative than I thought it would be. I'm not super like, take this with a grain of salt, but I think it's more conservative than LA, which you can agree to disagree. I don't know.
I mean, a lot of
But
people would say that because you've got the military bases there.
yes,
I mean, even
yes.
people even say that USD is more conservative than LMU.
Yes,
And
yes,
so I think the military bases tend to give it more than, for example, in LA or maybe San Francisco.
I
Do
completely
you think
agree.
that's true,
I
Sophie?
completely agree.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think one thing about San Diego is I just don't think it's a super, and I mean, this is kind of a stretch maybe, but I don't think it's a super political city in the way that, like, when I was growing up, like, politics was like, everyone was at protests and stuff. Like, we're right next to San Francisco and Berkeley. And down here, I don't think you get that as much. Like, there's still, like, there was still a massive No Kings protest and stuff, but day to day, you're not seeing as much political stuff as I think you would in other cities.
Friends, this concludes part 2 of my interview with Sophie and Lauren, breaking down SDSU from a student perspective. We hope you join us next week for the final part. On Thursday's episode, Kate joins me to take a question from a listener, and Susan also joins me to take a question from a listener. So you'll get 2 questions from listeners on Thursday. And then you'll get the final part on my feedback from my visit to the University of Miami, on February 22nd. And Lisa joins me to discuss the U. Friends, I was out gardening this morning, and I heard a quote from Mark Zuckerberg. And I know he's a controversial guy, founder of Facebook, now known as Meta. But I thought what he had to say was profound. And I want to leave you with this quote so you can germinate on it. Maybe it will help you if you're trying to decide what college to attend. Or I just believe there's some application of this in your own life. Maybe you're trying to decide to switch jobs, or to start your own business, or to move across the country, or to allow your mother-in-law to come live with you. So this is the quote from Zuckerberg. The biggest risk you can take is no risk at all. The biggest risk you can take is no risk at all. Contemplate that and apply it to your life. See you on Thursday, friends. And that's our show. A big thank you to you, our listeners, for tuning in this week. If you find this podcast helpful, please follow us and you will get every single episode as soon as they are released. If you want to support our podcast, you can click the share button and send it to your friends and acquaintances. You can say positive things about your college-bound kid on your social media feed. And you can help us stay commercial-free and pay our staff by donating on the yourcollegeboundkid website. You can write a review for us on Apple or Spotify. And if you have a question or a recommendation, just go to speakpipe.com/YCBK, hit the orange button, and speak. We will do our best to get your question in your own voice on an upcoming episode. I am the producer of the podcast, and I live in Metro Atlanta. We have a fantastic team that has over 200 years of admissions and counseling experience. Shout out to our co-host, Dr. Lisa Ruff in North Carolina, Susan Tree in Pennsylvania, Vince Garcia in California, Julia Esquivel in Massachusetts, Linda Depker in Missouri, Andy Strickler, the Chief Enrollment Officer at Connecticut College, New London, Connecticut, Hillary Dickman, an Admission Officer at Colorado College in Colorado Springs, and our International Admissions Expert, Kevin Newton in Dallas, Texas. Our sensational sound engineer is Nemanja Motvich. Our amazing music is from Victor Allen Weeks. Marketing designs from Kimberly Bloss. Our reliable webmaster is Stalionos Dimitru. Website updates are done by Joyce Stucker. Our image editor is Vlad Honchar. If you want to have a coaching session with me, just text me at 404-664-4340. If you want to reach someone else on our team, all of our bios with contact info can be found at yourcollegeboundkid.com under the About YCBK tab. If you want to get our free monthly YCBK newsletter, YCBK Plus, it is also under the About YCBK tab. If you want to see our recommended books and websites, they are on our website under the Resources tab. While you're on our website, check out our hundreds of interviews in their entirety. Check out our college spotlights, our blog, and our upcoming events. We think of you as our listening family, and we look forward to meeting with you every single Monday and every single Thursday.